In our headlines on this Thursday, March 5th, here in South Korea, U.S. Senate Republicans vote down a Democrat effort to limit Donald Trump's authority on additional military action against Iran. Here in Seoul, President Lee Jae-myung stresses the safety of South Korean nationals in the Middle East as the government's most urgent priority. And the local stock market and currency regain some ground, while the price of gasoline soars past 1,800 won for the first time in over 3 years. The U.S. Senate has voted against a Democrat-led resolution that sought to restrict President Donald Trump's power for further military action against Iran. Moon Hye-ryun covers that vote and more.
U.S. senators on Wednesday rejected a bid to halt President Donald Trump's military campaign against Iran, signaling early support for the war. The War Powers resolution, which would have required congressional approval for further strikes, failed in a largely party-line vote, with a similar showdown now looming in the House on Thursday. The vote comes as President Trump doubles down on the campaign, issuing a stark warning after Iran's supreme leader was killed in joint U.S.-Israeli airstrikes over the weekend. Trump said anyone who appears eager to assume Iran's top post ends up dead, while praising what he calls the success of Operation Epic Fury, claiming Iranian missiles and launch systems are being rapidly wiped out. At the Pentagon, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth struck a similarly forceful tone. According to Reuters, Hegseth said the U.S. was winning decisively under Trump's direct command and highlighted a major naval strike against one of Iran's most prized warships.
An American submarine sunk an Iranian warship that thought it was safe in international waters. Instead, it was sunk by a torpedo. Quiet death.
Even as U.S. officials highlight gains, questions are growing about whether the conflict could widen further on the ground. Fox News reported Wednesday that thousands of Kurdish fighters had launched a ground offensive inside Iran, while the Associated Press cited Kurdish sources claiming Washington had sought their support. The White House has denied those claims, with spokesperson Caroline Leavitt saying the U.S. is not backing an uprising, a position Hegseth has echoed, denying any U.S. role in arming Kurdish groups. With the conflict already expanding across the region, Turkey's Ministry of National Defense said Wednesday that a missile fired from Iran toward Turkish airspace had been shot down by NATO. Israel has continued to strike Iran-backed Hezbollah in Lebanon, while Iranian missiles have targeted Israel and Gulf states. According to the US-based human rights activists in Iran, the war has already killed over 1,000 civilians in Iran, while global energy markets and international travel have been disrupted. Behind the scenes, diplomacy appears uncertain. The New York Times reports that Iranian intelligence officials quietly reached out to the CIA through intermediaries shortly after the fighting began, signaling interest in talks. US officials remain skeptical, and Trump has since declared it too late for negotiations. Moon Hye-ryun, Arirang News.
And here in South Korea today, President Lee Jae-myung convened an extraordinary cabinet meeting in light of the events unfolding in the Middle East. Our Blue House correspondent Song Yu-jin covers that meeting.
Just a day after returning from his 4-day trip to Southeast Asia, President Lee Jae-myung convened an extraordinary cabinet meeting on Thursday to discuss the situation in the Middle East.
중동 지역 위기가 고조되면서 글로벌 경제 안보 환경이 많이 악화되고 있습니다. 각 부처는 엄중한 상황 인식을 바탕으로 예상 가능한 모든 문제들에 대해서 신속한 대책을 빠짐없게 또 세밀하게 추진해 나가야 되겠습니다.
He described the safety of Korean nationals in affected regions as the government's most urgent priority. He instructed officials to closely monitor the situation and prepare contingency plans for possible emergency evacuations, including the use of military aircraft and chartered flights if necessary.
We will dispatch 2 ambassador-level officials with experience in the Middle East and consular affairs on Thursday night to lead a government joint rapid response team. As a precaution, we will also issue advisories on the ground and prepare for possible evacuation operations.
The president also urged vigilance over potential economic fallout from the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, through which about a fifth of the world's oil is shipped. He placed particular emphasis on energy supplies such as crude oil and gas, noting that disruptions would have direct repercussions across related industries and people's livelihoods.
원유, 가스, 나프타 등에 대한 긴급 수급 안정책과 함께 중장기적으로 수입처를 다각화하는 방안을 신속하게 추진해 주시기 바랍니다.
According to the industry ministry, the country holds petroleum reserves equivalent to roughly 7 months of supply. For natural gas, supplies could last until late November, assuming contracted shipments from sources such as Australia and the United States continue as planned. President Lee says if handled properly, the situation could rather serve as a chance to strengthen the economy, from stabilizing South Korea's overheated financial markets to accelerating its transition away from crude oil to renewable energy. 송유진, Arirang News.
Indeed, the president has also called for a crackdown on any attempt to abuse the economic fallout from tensions in the Middle East as the price of gasoline soars here in the country. Our Kim Do-yeon reports.
At the extraordinary cabinet meeting held on Thursday due to the Middle East situation, President Lee Jae-myung emphasized protecting the economy. His remarks came specifically after the national average price of gasoline surpassed 1,800 won for the first time in about 3 years and 7 months. The national average price for regular gasoline rose 2.5% on Thursday from the previous day to 1,821 won per liter, while automotive diesel jumped 4.76% to 1,811 won per liter. The president strongly emphasized the need to crack down on foul play, taking advantage of the current situation, and ordered the cabinet to devise measures to prevent price gouging.
관광지에 손님 많이 오니까 바가지 씌워야지 이런 거 지금 제재하잖아요. 네, 이 석유 판매에 대해서는 이거 바가지 아닙니까? 이 바가지에 대해서는 제재할 법적 근거가 현재는 없다는 겁니까?
President Lee also stressed the importance of protecting the stock markets, which have been surging over the past few months before being heavily impacted by the Middle East situation. He ordered his cabinet to properly and swiftly execute and manage the 100 trillion won market stabilization program. For now, the local stock market rebounded on Thursday. The benchmark Kospi closed at 5583.90, up 9.63% from the day before. During trading, a buy-side sidecar was activated due to the rapid surge. The recovery follows a historical fall of 12.06% on Wednesday when a circuit breaker was activated. The Kosdaq index also closed at 1116.41, surging 137.97 points, or 14.1% from the previous session. This marks the largest increase in its history. Regarding the market volatility, President Lee ordered strict protection measures against market manipulation and fake news.
이럴 때 기승을 부리는 가짜 뉴스 유포, 또 시세 교란 같은 범죄 행위도 철저하게 차단하기 바랍니다. 특히 국민 경제의 혼란을 조장해서 이익을 취하려는 그런 세력들에 대해서는 무관용의 원칙으로 엄중하게 책임을 물어야 되겠습니다.
Meanwhile, the local currency strengthened slightly against the greenback. The $1 exchange rate closed at 1467.04 won, down 0.62% from the previous day. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Also here in Seoul, the top diplomats of Iran and Israel stationed here in the capital city hosted separate press conferences earlier today to share their respective government stances amid their latest confrontation. Our foreign affairs correspondent Oh Soo-young reports.
Fears of a prolonged conflict in the Middle East are reverberating beyond the region as Iran and Israel's top diplomats convey clashing narratives to the Korean public. Meeting with reporters in Seoul, Iran's ambassador Saeed Ghuzaichi said on Thursday that his government is prepared for a long war with the United States and Israel. stating there is currently no plan to return to nuclear negotiations as long as attacks on Iran continue. As the conflict stretches out, he said there could be far-reaching implications for East Asia, where economies such as South Korea rely heavily on energy supplies from the Middle East. The ambassador also noted the possibility that US forces stationed in South Korea could be deployed to the region.
The U.S. has denied this, but we do not trust their response. If you understand Iran's geography, ground deployments make no sense. If the U.S. wants to take reckless actions, we welcome it, and many people will die.
He rejected accusations of Tehran's nuclear weapons development as false propaganda and a pretext to justify pressure and war. In sharp contrast, Rafael Harpas, Israel's ambassador to South Korea, held a press conference the same morning. He defended the initial February 28 strikes as necessary to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons and expanding its ballistic missile capabilities, and to protect Iranian civilians from a brutal regime. He claimed Iran had already reached the final stages of nuclear development last year.
Iran is deceiving, cheating the international community for how many decades about nuclear program for peaceful use? Iran wants nuclear program for one. If they want to drag the time in negotiation, the world gave them one chance, another chance, another chance. If we wait, they will become nuclear like North Korea.
The Foreign Ministry has expressed grave concern over the escalating situation, with hope that dialogue and negotiations will soon be resumed. It also reaffirms Ho's strong commitment to the global non-proliferation regime as it actively participates in international efforts to address the Iranian nuclear issue. Seoul also says it's closely monitoring developments between the US, Israel and Iran, focusing on the safety of Korean nationals in the region and safeguarding global energy supplies. Seoul, Arirang News.
The Trump administration's military campaign against Iran has raised questions about its policy on North Korea. For now, officials say no connection should be made and that there is no change in the U.S.'s stance on the regime. Our Lee Seung-jae has details.
U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says Washington's ongoing military operation against Iran will send plenty of signals as the United States moves to address Tehran's nuclear ambitions. Hegseth made the remarks during a press briefing on Wednesday on the U.S. military campaign, codenamed Operation Epic Fury, which began Saturday in coordination with Israel. Responding to a question about North Korea's criticism of the operation, the defense secretary said the situation involving Iran should not be viewed in connection with other countries. He stressed that the United States remains focused on dealing with Iran's nuclear ambitions, adding that the steps taken in the process will send clear signals. His comments came after Pyongyang condemned the U.S.-Israel campaign on Sunday, calling it an unlawful act and a violation of Iran's sovereignty. Meanwhile, the White House says Washington's policy toward North Korea remains unchanged. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Wednesday there has been no shift in the U.S. position on North Korea when asked whether the strike on Iran over its nuclear program would affect Washington's approach toward Pyongyang. The Trump administration maintains what it describes as a dual-track strategy toward North Korea, combining strong deterrence with a high degree of diplomatic flexibility. While the administration continues to uphold the goal of complete denuclearization officially, Washington has shown a shift toward nuclear management and a de facto acknowledgement of North Korea's nuclear status. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And across the border in North Korea, Kim Jong-un appears to have adopted a strategic intention, according to one pundit here, to flex military muscle. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung explains.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un inspected his regime's new 5,000-ton destroyer, the Cheon, for 2 consecutive days ahead of its commissioning and watched tests of ship-launched surface-to-surface strategic cruise missiles. According to the Korean Central News Agency on Thursday, Kim toured the destroyer at the Nampo shipyard on March 3rd and 4th to review its operational capabilities and the combat training of her crew. Touting that the ship's maneuverability met requirements, he said the destroyer was a new symbol of the regime's maritime defense capability. Regarding the simultaneous launches of at least 4 strategic cruise missiles, Kim reportedly called the test a core element in evaluating the ship's operational capabilities. One expert says the move appears aimed at showcasing North Korea's military strength.
This likely reflects a strategic intention to demonstrate military strength in response to the situation involving Iran in the Middle East and as a counter to the upcoming South Korea-U.S. joint military exercises.
Kim ordered the construction of a further 2 Cheon-class warships displacing 5,000 tons or more every year for the next 5 years, underlining the need to boost the regime's maritime capability. During his visit, Kim also looked over the 3rd Cheon-class destroyer being built at the shipyard, which has a targeted completion date of October 10th, the anniversary of the founding of the Workers' Party of Korea.
Since its naval power significantly lags behind that of South Korea and the U.S., such aforementioned plans may be part of an effort to boost its nuclear-capable naval forces.
The Cheon is the regime's first newly built operational 5,000-ton destroyer and was launched on April 25th last year. This was followed by the launch of a second in the class, the Gangon, though it partially capsized during an initial launch attempt. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
The cabinet today approved major bills, including 3 judicial reform laws and a revision to the Commercial Act. The judicial reform package seeks to expand the number of Supreme Court justices, punish judges and prosecutors for deliberately distorting the application of law, and allow individuals to file constitutional complaints against court rulings. The cabinet also approved a special act on administrative integration of the Jeollanam-do province and Gwangju region. The Commercial Act revision, which takes effect immediately, requires companies to cancel newly acquired treasury shares within 1 year and existing holdings within 18 months. President Lee Jae-myung and First Lady Kim Hye-kyung hosted members of Team Korea for lunch at the Blue House today, given their performance at this year's Winter Games in Italy.
대한민국을 가슴에 새기고 한계를 뛰어넘는 도전으로 뜨거운 감동과 자부심을 안겨준 대한민국 국가대표 선수단 여러분, 여러분들이 대한민국의 자부심입니다. 고맙습니다.
The president also applauded the coaching staff as well as the Korean Sports and Olympic Committee's meal service team for their respective roles. He further pledged full support for winter sports by expanding training facilities that meet international standards, among other efforts. Over in Barcelona, Korea's smaller businesses are sharing their technological innovations at this year's Mobile World Congress. And our business correspondent Park Chun-han was there to explore them firsthand.
At the Mobile World Congress, companies, exhibitors, and potential buyers from 200 countries gather to discover hidden gems in the tech world. It's not just global mega companies that showcase their latest technologies. Here at MWC, there are dedicated pavilions like this one to promote small and medium-sized Korean businesses. This year, 131 SMEs from Korea participated to showcase technologies tailored for global markets. Among them, there was one company which was nominated for this year's Global Awards, often called the Oscars of the mobile industry. That company was N-Open. It provides biometric authentication and identity verification solutions using on-device AI and a physically isolated token system, enabling secure authentication without relying on servers or the cloud.
We are extremely proud that our solution was nominated for the GLOMO Awards, especially given the challenging environment for entering the biometrics market in Europe. Going forward, we will continue to make every effort to ensure that our solution can make a full-scale entry into the European market.
A potential buyer from Spain who visited Korea Trade Investment Promotion Agency's pavilion praised the technology on display.
I think the main interest is the technology of Korean companies, because Korean technology is amazing, is cutting edge, one of the best in the world. Apart from sales, which is our core objective, we can also support them in all the regulatory compliance and the setup process.
As of Wednesday local time, participating SMEs had recorded 556 business consultations, with expert consultations reaching around $195 million and contracts under negotiation totaling $18.6 million. Park Junan, Arirang News, Barcelona.
And as we've been reporting in recent times, Korea and France celebrate 140 years of diplomatic relations this year. And to mark the occasion, a series of elaborate shows are in the works. Our culture correspondent Park Gonu reports.
Kicking things off in March will be a collaboration between South Korea's Busan Philharmonic Orchestra and French musicians.
Yes, I'm really excited to perform here for this beautiful event and to perform for my first time. Also to discover a bit about the country and the culture, I hope, and the audience.
The orchestra's principal conductor, who's also French, said he enjoys collaborating with Korean artists whom he considers highly talented, while also sharing his experience working with K-pop acts like Stray Kids earlier this year.
What was really extraordinary was the reception of the audience, and the public was right behind me, and I could hear like 30,000 French, and they know all the lyrics. Music and culture is more globally shared, so I would say it belongs to everyone. Yeah, it's a really special experience to be able to make music here in Korea.
After becoming the most streamed K-pop group in France last year, Stray Kids saw member Felix named an honorary ambassador for the 140th anniversary of Korea-France diplomatic ties, alongside legendary movie star Chun Ji-hyun.
We think that cinema and music are the perfect arts to bring our young generation together. It's really a universal language. So for us it was important to have celebrities, personalities coming from those two major art scenes.
As June marks the month when the two countries first established diplomatic relations, a number of events are planned, including a performance by legendary soprano Cho Soo-mi at Deoksugun Palace for the official 140th anniversary ceremony. Another highlight is the K-pop Song Camp, where rising French composers visit Korea to collaborate. The program's returning for its second edition after the success of its inaugural event last year.
We aim to further strengthen the relationship in all aspects so that we can leave a significant legacy together. In particular, this time we've prepared a wide range of cultural events to engage all generations, especially the younger generation.
With more and more of these cultural events set to take place around the corner, the bilateral relationship between Korea and France is expected to grow even stronger throughout the year. Park Gonu, Arirang News.
Today is Gyeongchip, the seasonal point that symbolizes nature awakening from winter sleep. And true to the season, we had milder than usual temperatures, but rain and snow will return this evening, starting from the west. Most regions will receive 5 to 20 millimeters of rainfall, while mountainous areas of Gangwon-do province and central inland regions might see snow instead through tomorrow. And today's wet weather will bring colder air to the country. Afternoon highs in most parts will be 4 to 5 degrees lower than today. However, the morning will be as chilly as today. Seoul begins the day at 2 degrees Celsius, Gwangju at 3 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul and Daejeon will only get up to 6 degrees Celsius. Gwangju, Jeju topping out at 9 degrees. And air quality could be as bad as today in the west of central regions. Morning temperatures will go down to below freezing over the weekend. With that in mind, here's a look at the international weather conditions.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session, so do stay with us and thank you for now.
How to survive in Korea. Weddings. Step 0. Attire. As a guest, dress formal to business casual. Avoid wearing all white, shorts or going topless. Step 1. Arrival time. Arrive 30 minutes prior to the wedding ceremony. Too many cars, too many halls, too many people. There are many twists and turns. Take pictures and shake hands. And write your name vertically, not horizontally in the guest book. Step 2. Or shibor. 50,000 won, 100,000 won, 150,000 won. Cash gifts are given in these units. Decide on the amount based on your relationship. Write your name vertically on the envelope. Step 3. Wedding etiquette. Fill up the front row. Guests have 3 duties to fulfill: clapping, cheering, and taking pictures. Step 4. Dining. Take off your jacket. This will be your seat from now on. Start with the not your everyday delicacies. Galbijjim. Yes. Bosa. Yes. Chili shrimps. Definitely yes. Kimbap. Yeah. Only if you can't live without it. No need to pile up food. You have more than one opportunity. Did you survive the wedding? Wait. Did someone catch your eye? What are you waiting for? You're looking fine today.
From breaking news in South Korea to stories from around the world, we're here to bring you the news that matters.
Truth, clarity, and impartiality. And that's what we uphold in a fast-changing world.
We go beyond the headlines, offering depth, context, and perspective.
This isn't just news, it's our commitment. News you trust. Arirang News.
저먼 바다 끝에 뭐가 있을까?
The ripple effects of the military confrontation in the Middle East have been clear here in South Korea since the start of this work week, when both its stock market and currency tumbled. With more on Press Perspective today. Welcome to Press Perspective for this Thursday, March 5th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. Today, we touch upon the broader economic fallout of a prolonged military conflict in the Middle East. For more on this, I have Lee Ji-hoon with Reuters here in the studio. Ji-hoon, welcome back.
Glad to be here again.
I also have Professor Yang Hee-dong at Ewha Women's University live on the line. Professor Yang, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Right, Ji-hoon, we shall start here in the studio. Let's begin with the repercussions of the military conflict in the Middle East on global stock markets.
Yeah, globally, this week market volatility heightened with oil prices rising to the highest levels in more than a year, and with Brent crude rising above $80 per barrel on worries about energy supply disruptions. The US dollar hit 3 months highs as higher oil prices sparked inflation worries and risk-off sentiment. US stocks were also volatile this week, but the market impact was particularly hard on Asian stocks such as South Korea, Taiwan, and Japan, because those Asian countries are heavily dependent on oil supplies from the Middle East. And in Asia, South Korea was especially hit hard. This week, the dollar-won exchange rate hit the psychological barrier of 1,500 per dollar for the first time since the global financial crisis in 2009. There was quite a rise because just last week, the won was trading around 1420, with the central bank governor saying foreign exchange market conditions were improving. And then on Wednesday, the stock market crashed, falling 12%, which was the biggest daily percentage fall in the stock market's 46 years of history. Circuit breakers were activated for the first time since August 2024. And combined with Tuesday's 7% drop, our market capitalization fell by $500 billion in just 2 days. Analysts say South Korea was hit hard because it is the fourth largest oil importer in the world, with 70% of oil purchases coming from the Middle East. Also, South Korea's stock market had been on a world-beating AI rally, with the Kospi more than doubling over the past year. So that was why it was more vulnerable to profit-taking pressure after this geopolitical conflict in the Middle East. Today, Kospi rebounded sharply after authorities fought market stabilizing measures, including 100 trillion won market stabilizing program. But analysts say volatility will remain high at least for some time because when it comes to geopolitical risks, uncertainty is inevitably very high.
Right. Professor Yang, as Ji-hoon mentioned earlier, what more can you tell us about the Asian stock market being more vulnerable to the volatile situation in the Middle East?
Well, I can think about a couple of reasons behind this very big fluctuation. The first one is, particularly in Korea, the stock price have increased too much this year and also last year. For example, Kospi increased about 76% last year, which is number one. And within this year, during the last 2 months, in January and February, Kospi increased almost by 42.2%, which is still number one, followed by Costa, about 29%, which is number two. Whereas Taiwan, 23%, Japan, 17%, China, about 9%, United States, Standard & Poor's, about 0.5%. So many investors, particularly foreign investors, are really concerned that they're looking for the right timing to sell their stocks. And the second reason for this big fluctuation is our dependency on export is too much, exceeding about 42% as of last year. right, compared to the GDP, whereas Japan, their dependence on export for the GDP stays around 18 or 19%. So if as Iran declared to block the Strait of Hormuz, if we have a problem in that region, we can think about the three very bad impacts on our export performance. The first one is, our energy will be in big trouble, because we depend on the Strait of Hormuz for the 70% of our import of crude oil, and also the about 20% of our LNG import. And number two, we can have a problem in the delivery lead, because this area is very important for the delivery and export of the items. If this area is blocked, then we can suffer from a lot of lag and the delay of the delivery of the stuff to those areas and to other areas in Europe. Number three, as report Ji-Hoon Lee mentioned, we will experience big fluctuations for the exchange rate and also stock prices. Particularly, the foreign investors are really concerned about big fluctuation of exchange rate. For the past 4 years, Korea is one of the top 4 countries who has suffered a lot of big, exchange rate change. Japan, India, Brazil, and Korea are those 4 countries that have experienced very big exchange rate fluctuations. So if you're investors and if you really recognize a big fluctuation in exchange rate, you may hesitate to invest in the stocks in the Korean market. So these are the major impacts, major reasons why we have suffered the big fluctuations due to the war between the U.S. and Iran.
Right, and adding on to that strong sense of anxiety, Ji-Hoon, I believe there are also mounting concerns over the chip market. Could you tell us a bit about the outlook shared by the foreign media?
Yeah. So this morning there was a meeting among government officials and lawmakers, as well as major South Korean chip-making companies such as Samsung Electronics. And at the meeting, the concerns were raised that there might be supply chain disruptions for the semiconductor industry because of this Middle East crisis. Chip makers often benefit from higher chip prices, but then they were concerned about supply disruptions for raw materials such as helium, which are essential for chip production. Also, it could be a blow for South Korean chip makers if data center constructions by big U.S. companies in the Middle East are delayed because of this crisis. Amazon said this week its data centers in the UAE and Bahrain are already damaged by drone strikes. And Microsoft and NVIDIA have also been seeing the UAE as a regional hub for their AI computing. When it comes to the domestic impact, the South Korean government said it has enough capacity to deal with short-term supply disruptions. And President Lee Jae-myung said today, after returning from his trip to Southeast Asia, that the government will make sure or make efforts to diversify energy supplies in the long run. The Finance Ministry also said the government will provide financial support to companies to help them cope with higher oil prices by utilizing its supply chain stabilization fund. And most recently, this afternoon, the government also said that it will crack down on excessive price increases by oil suppliers to help stabilize inflation or consumer inflation.
Right, indeed. Meanwhile, Professor Yang, over in the U.S., Mr. Trump has spoken of his military campaign against Iran lasting for about 4 to 5 weeks. That being said, what would be the impact of a prolonged warfare on South Korea, do you think?
Well, we can think about very different lag effect on very different items of our export, for example, or the domestic economic market. Well, the first one is immediate impact, particularly for the energy and the stock market, as we already have experienced. Yesterday, we have the experience of very bad, one of the worst ever, stock price drop. We have minus 12% for the Kospi and minus 14% of Costa, and our exchange rate increase over 1,500, right, per dollars. That is immediate impact from this kind of a very bad disaster. And the second impact that may be realized in 2 weeks or through 2 months. I mean, such a very midterm impact will be realized for the business operations and global trade, because I already mentioned the oil refinery, chemicals, distributors, and the steel industry may experience very bad operations due to the pressures from the lack of delivery of energy. And export companies will experience a lot of lag in the delivery of their products, and also the freight, the sea freight company need to look for alternative routes to arrive at their original destinations. And the longest term that may be realized in 2 or 6 months are about the macroeconomic indicators, such as the consumer prices or consumption or investment. So in other words, as late as the 6 months, all this effect from the disasters, I mean, during the war between Iran and the United States, will be realized in the macroeconomic indicators that may impact and press on most of the government to take care of their GDP, their progress, and also their controlling over the CPI. So you can think about as the 3 different timelines. I mean, immediate impact or mid-term impact, such as 2 weeks and 2 months, and long-term impact exceeding over 2 through 6 months.
Right, I see. Meanwhile, Chiun, prior to the tensions in the Middle East, Mr. Trump had declared a universal tariff of 10% on all American trade partners after the Supreme Court ruled that his reciprocal tariffs were unlawful. What's the latest on that front?
Yeah, as you said, last month, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that President Donald Trump's so-called reciprocal tariffs on trading partners are unconstitutional. And following the ruling, President Trump announced new 10% tariffs, or global 10% tariffs, which was later followed by another threat to hike them to higher 15%. The hike to 15% is expected to be implemented this week, according to U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent's interview yesterday. To be clear, South Korea was already, before Trump's new announcement, South Korea was already under 15% tariffs under the trade deal it reached with the Trump administration last year. And this new tariff is separate from sectoral tariffs, such as those on autos and steel. So South Korea, the immediate impact on South Korea should be limited from this new announcement. However, separately from this, and more importantly, there still is uncertainty over South Korea because President Trump earlier this year announced that he would raise tariffs on South Korea to 25%, saying South Korea was not following through on its trade deal. After his threat, South Korea has been speeding up its implementation of the trade deal by setting up a committee to first electing U.S. investment projects. And South Korea's parliament has also been fast-tracking the bill on U.S. investment package, which is expected to be passed next week. However, with the dollar-won rate rising above 1,500 per dollar again this week, there are some concerns raised again about foreign exchange volatility. And that is again raising uncertainty over the U.S. investment package again, because South Korea has said foreign exchange stability needs to be ensured for U.S. investments to take place.
Right. Professor Yang, speaking as a scholar, what more can you tell us about the impact of Mr. Trump's tariffs on South Korea's major export items, of course, including cars and chips?
Well, you may remember the Donald Trump declaration of Liberation Day, April 2nd last year. So he declared that the United States is liberated, whereas Korea was liberated from the Japanese colony, a long time ago. So why did he say that? Because he thinks that the United States can be liberated from very aggressive trade from their trade partners. And he declared to charge about 10% as reciprocal tariff. And afterwards, he declared another additional reciprocal tariff. So since October, during the APEC summit, Korea was supposed to levy for 15% for the overall reciprocal tariff. Now, this decision is nullified by the final decision of the grand court in the United States. But my point here is Donald Trump will look for alternative ways to keep very similar levels of a burden on their trade partners. They have a Section 122 or 232 of a Trade Expansion Act. They also have a Super 301 clause. So the Donald Trump and his government will look for all these alternative legal, the foundations, right, to levy the extra tariff burdens on their trade partners. So in short, no matter what happened in the low court in the United States, I mean, the actual burdens on us and Korean export companies almost remain the same. We already have about 15%, and still we'll have to pay about 50% for the export. And, the Section 122 or 233 or Super 301, all these legal articles, to rationalize, to charge their extra tariff on the items. These legal, the articles allow the Trump government to levy taxes for individual items, not the overall reciprocal tariff. So in the automobile industry, they are already aware of the 50% of extra tax. And semiconductors had a very superb job last year, and this year they already well know that they'll be charged for 25% extra tariff for very high end of semiconductors, whereas they can be freed from the semiconductors for the data centers. But anyhow, my point here is Donald Trump, why did he do that? Because he tried to persuade their trade partners to replace their export policy with direct investment in the United States. And, most of them, all of the Korean companies have been prepared very well for their direct investment plans in the United States. So no matter what Donald Trump tries to change or the experience about different policies, I do believe that Korean companies are well prepared, are well aware of all this very highly uncertain trade policies from the United States.
Right then. Despite the uncertainty over the U.S. trade policy, Ji-hoon, South Korea's exports during the first 2 months of this year as well noted remarkable growth. Could you tell us a bit more?
Yeah, exports rose 29% in February from a year earlier, which was faster than market expectations for a 24% rise. It was the 9th straight month of increases as the global boom in AI investment continued to raise demand for semiconductors. The 29% increase was weaker than the previous month's 34%, but there were calendar effects from the Lunar New Year holidays, and it was still the second fastest in the current gaining streak. In February, semiconductor exports surged 160% to hit a fresh record high as memory chip prices continued to rise on AI demand. Analysts say there is a high possibility semiconductor export growth will exceed 100% throughout the first half of this year. And last week, the Bank of Korea also raised its GDP forecast for South Korea for this year to 2% from 1.8%, citing stronger chip growth this year. Because of this chip-led export boom, analysts say the Bank of Korea is likely to hold interest rates steady throughout this year because strong growth will help the central bank focus more on financial stability risks such as exchange rate volatility. And this Middle East crisis is also raising upside risk to inflation. So more the reason the Bank of Korea will likely at least hold interest rates steady this year.
Right, I see. Meanwhile, Professor Yang, as we were saying, South Korea's exports and its stock market, as of today, of course, have remained largely resilient amid the presence of external risk factors. Do you suppose this trend looks to continue this year? And if that is the case, what support measures would you suggest to maintain this momentum?
Yeah, I believe that this kind of very positive momentum will remain in the current stock market because, as already Jin-Ho Lee mentioned, Korean companies will realize a very handsome export performance this year. Already last year, our #1 export item is semiconductors, about $173 billion, followed by automobiles, about $72 billion. And this year, in January, semiconductors increased by 34% for export, and automobile increased by 22%. Even in February, semiconductors even did a better job. Their export increased almost 161%. Why? Because there's a heavy investment on AI in the world, and this AI investment will go in parallel with higher demand for the DM memories, which is the items of Samsung and also the Hynix. So that's why, I argue that we may well maintain very positive forecasts and prospects for our export. And #1 is semiconductor remain very handsome. Well, automobiles, even though they decrease about 20% in the export for the February, but because their manufacturing schedules were reduced in this month, because we have lunatic New Year's holiday. So I do believe that lots of economic forecasts remain around 1.9 or 2% of annual growth for GDP this year. But the only, the uncertainty is, again, the war between Iran and the United States. And if there's energy problems or the delivery lag problems to remain by a long time this year, our export absolutely will be dampened badly from these bad disasters. So that is the only risk I think about. So how can our government can maintain this momentum? #1 is they need to try to minimize the impact from this war for the logistics and for the energy consumption. #2, we need to stabilize the financial market for the stock prices and for the exchange rate. And #3, we need to persuade the lawmakers to, approve very fast all these legal preparations, which is heavily pressured from the United States. And #4, we need to diversify our export items. Still, we depend too much on those two items, semiconductors and automobiles. And this is not desirable, right? Because if we have problems with those two, so we need to diversify more items, including KR, K-food, whatever. So these are the 4 major directions of government policy to keep the momentum.
Right, perhaps tapping on, of course, on K-pop as well then. Yeah. All right, Professor Yang, as always, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts today.
Thank you.
And Chiun here in the studio, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you very much.
Right, that ends this edition of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching. Do join us again same time tomorrow for more panel discussion.